quite common that a client will come to us with any of the following questions, like, if I increase my communication frequency, will I yield better results? Or can I reactivate more customers by leading with a strong promotion or by saving my best promotion for last? Or how about, if I change the order of my campaigns for my welcome journey, can I increase customer value? Well, while many of us are familiar with doing simple and traditional A/B tests to optimize our content or our subject lines, sometimes these larger, more strategic questions are challenging to test and measure. That's why for today, we're going to focus on the fundamentals to do just that. Hi everyone, my name is Sam Resnikow, and I am a director in the Strategic Services Department. And today we're going to focus on 3 easy steps so that you can get started with implementing testing principles on larger, grander, more strategic questions for your marketing plans. Let's jump in. First and foremost, always consider testing similar player groups so that you are comparing apples to apples. Just like in a traditional A/B campaign, it's important that you have similar player or customer mixes, so at the end of the day, you can attribute the success to what's changed rather than differences in the player or customer groups. Second, it's important to set the right and relevant KPI to measure the performance of your campaigns, right? So different campaign groups typically bring distinct and unique objectives. If we're talking about a campaign that would be sent to active customers versus churned customers, those groups have different objectives. In one, we want to increase the value and keep them retained. In the other, our goal is to reactivate them. So make sure you're measuring the performance of the campaign with the relevant KPI. And third, make sure that you're isolating the testing variable so that at the end of the day, you can attribute the success of your change to a single variable, right? If you are to include multiple variables that are changing between the two groups, it can make it hard for you to understand what truly drove success. So try to test a single variable at a time. Let's put some examples to this to bring it together. Let's say that I want to understand a test for low risk of churn customers or a test for high risk of churn customers. Well, first and foremost, it's important that you separate these two groups as they have distinct objectives, right? So the low risk of churn customers, our goal is to increase spend, while for the high risk of churn customers, our goal is just to keep them active, to make them have another activity. So for each one of these tests, we would have distinct groups, which we call streams, so that you are comparing within the low risk of churn customers, 2 groups, and within the high risk of churn customers, 2 groups, but we are not mixing the 2 into one test. So you would have separate groups for low risk of churn and another separate groups for high risk of churn. Next, isolate the testing variable. So let's say you're interested in understanding the impact of campaign frequency. For one journey, perhaps you have 3 communications a week versus another, you want to try 5 communications a week. That is your test and that is what you will measure. If you also want to measure, let's say the campaign order, understanding if you lead with certain campaigns or certain promotions versus others, you should consider doing that as a separate test. If you are to combine both of these elements into one, it's going to make it difficult to understand what drove the successful outcome. Was it the frequency or was it the order? And lastly, once you have your results, be sure to review them and understand how can you optimize them. Now that we've done so with single variables and single objectives, we can confidently attribute the success and the performance of these campaigns to what we changed and what we tested. Now in Optimum, it's quite easy to conduct these tests and to understand the performance and to implement these changes in just a few clicks using what we call the streams feature. But there's many additional variables that you can test. Some of them might be the frequency, some of them might be the order, or perhaps the impact of implementing an omni-channel approach versus more of a single channel approach. Understanding the impact of bonus distribution, having multiple small bonuses versus having a single large promotion. Or maybe you just want to know, how will this new journey compare to a previous journey? All of this can be achieved through streams testing principles. So let's just recap it before we head out. First and foremost, home in on what your hypothesis is and what you want to actually test. Then make sure you're comparing apples to apples by having similar player and customer groups. Third, make sure that you're isolating the testing variable so you can understand what truly drove the successful outcome. Doing so, you need to set the right KPI to measure. And then lastly, optimize and continue to test. So move through it piece by piece, variable by variable, and at the end of the day, you will have extreme confidence in knowing what is driving the successful outcomes. That's it for today. Thanks, everyone.